Colombia's getting threatened. Mexico's getting threatened. Honduras is getting basically cooed. Nicaragua's getting threatened. Cuba's getting threatened. Venezuela's getting threatened. Are you going to allow them to do the same thing? Is that a smart idea? Do what you want, not my country. I don't have a dog in the fight necessarily. I just want people to have their sovereignty respected. That's all I really care about. Beyond that, it's not my country, not my people. But if you seek to maintain sovereignty for the people of your countries, I think we need to start thinking about how we defend ourselves in a different way. Donald Trump has now threatened for the 400th time that land strikes are about to begin on Venezuela. He did this today. He did this 2 days ago. I think he's coming out and saying this pretty much every time he gets before the press right now. He says it on Air Force One. Here he is saying it once again.
You released video of that first boat strike on September 2nd, but not the second video. Will you release video of that strike so that the American people can see for themselves what happened?
I don't know what they have, but whatever they have, we'd certainly release. No problem. You know, we stopped every boat we knock out. We save 25,000 American lives.
That's right.
That's right. And if you look at our numbers, the drugs coming in through sea are down 91%. I'm surprised there's 9%. You want to? I don't know who's doing the 9%, but it's down 91, and we're going to start very soon on land, and I'm sure you're thrilled.
He keeps saying we're going to start on land. It's going to be so easy. I don't know if he knows this, but actually there are no Venezuelan air defense systems 50 miles off the coast of Venezuela in the territorial waters of the country. There are no air defense systems 100 miles off the coast, wherever. There are, however, air defense systems that are going to become an issue for anyone who attempts to fly fighter jets near the land in Venezuela, which I'd assume they're going to try to avoid being over Venezuela. I don't think they have a reason to necessarily be over Venezuela. I don't think they're going to use bunker buster bombs or anything like that. But, you know, I don't think it's easier to strike on Venezuelan land. I don't really know where he's getting that idea. Who in the Department of War is I guess, trying to convince him of that, which is clearly a falsehood. A worrying sign of that is what I'm about to show you right here, that this might begin soon, because even though there have been there was the reported closure of Venezuela's airspace. We're going to talk more about this in a second. Trump reportedly closed Venezuela's airspace. But yesterday, or 2 days ago, I had a friend who landed in Caracas. I don't know where he flew in from, but I know he landed in Caracas yesterday. I don't know if it's just that there's not flights going out of Venezuela or coming into Venezuela. I don't really know. But I do know there were still a few flights. Now we see this. Worrying sign is Panama's Copa Airlines suspends flights to and from Caracas for December 4th and 5th, reporting intermittencies in navigation signals. The area in and around Venezuela has seen a lot of GPS jamming in recent weeks. The connection to Panama City is important since it is a major hub in the hemisphere. But also, it's like Venezuela is, I believe, objectively, it's a U.S. allied state right now. The government is allied with the U.S., so you could take that to mean one of two things. Either they know something's about to happen, or simply they just don't want to fly to Venezuela. I mean, plenty of countries don't do that, and they tried to enforce this stranglehold by sea, by air, by economic trade routes, so on and so forth with Venezuela. Like, I remember I flew to Venezuela the first time. I went Miami, and then I went some other country. I don't remember the country. And then I landed in Venezuela. So I had a connection flight, but when I was leaving Venezuela after the presidential elections, I couldn't go through the same country I went to because they canceled diplomatic relations with Venezuela and canceled all flights. So this could be something like that. Then again, it could be something that would indicate strikes coming soon. Now, Trump keeps saying the drugs, the drugs, the drugs. As we all know, we've discussed many times before, Rand Paul has discussed this, the drugs don't come from Venezuela. They do come from other countries in Latin America, but the drugs do not come from Venezuela. This is the Drug Enforcement Administration. This is not Venezuela Maduro propaganda. National Drug threat assessment of 2024. And if you actually look through this entire document, you can find ample coverage and analysis about drugs coming from Mexico, from Peru, from Colombia, Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels. You can see all of this stuff. What you cannot find if you look through this entire document is anything about Venezuela. In fact, you can do a simple word search on this document. Venezuela is actually not mentioned even once in the entire report from the NDTA in 2024. So unless there was a, I guess, meaningful uptick in the alleged drug smuggling from Caracas in 2025, I don't think that they're coming from there. And when I say they're coming from Mexico, when I say they're coming from Colombia or Peru, I mean they're coming from the U.S. allied organizations, the CIA-sponsored organizations in each of these countries. They're not coming from Claudia Sheinbaum. They're not coming from, the president. They're coming from the organizations, groups, and personnel that are actually allied with the federal government of the United States in each of these countries, okay? Now, it seems as though we are getting into a bit of a pickle because Trump is receiving a lot of pressure over the fact that Pete Hegseth ordered a double tap strike on some of the Colombian fishermen who were killed on September 15th after they were knocked off of their vessel in what I would presume to be the territorial waters of either Venezuela or Colombia, maybe international waters, I don't know. And they were clinging to a piece of driftwood from the destroyed vessel. These fishermen were then subsequently killed moments later by a double tap strike, despite the fact that they pose no threat to the United States. So now that this is being exposed, now that the media is talking about this and asking questions, now that some Democrats are saying that Pete Hegseth should be, should face some criminal prosecution as a result of these war crimes, which, by the way, I find it quite interesting that the media, everyone is so upset about these war crimes, but the bipartisan consensus stayed completely silent about the war crimes in Gaza, Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, so on and so forth over the past several years. But now they're happy to talk about this because, well, there's no, there's no effective lobby group that's trying to silence them, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. In the same way that we have an Israel lobby in the United States. So they're allowed to talk about these war crimes. We have Carrie Lake, one of Trump's closest associates and bootlickers, who came out and posted this in an effort to try and soften the blow of the war crimes being exposed to the public, in an effort to try and persuade Americans to support war at a time when 70% of Americans say that they oppose any sort of military intervention in Venezuela. She said, letter written to President Trump from a man formerly inside the Maduro regime cartel. This is a stark warning. So she publishes this letter, and General Mike Flynn posted this letter as well. He wrote a 5-page essay about this, explaining why, we need to be so worried about Maduro now because the former spy chief of Maduro, Hugo Chavez, came out and said that, yes, Maduro actually is a dictator and actually is a narco-terrorist. Only problem with this whole theory, well, not the only problem, but maybe the biggest problem with this is this guy who wrote the letter is sitting in a U.S. prison right now after being illegally extradited and sent to a U.S. prison, and, they put him up and they charged him with all these phony crimes and whatnot because he was working with Maduro. So this man, the Hugo Carvajal Barrios, he says that Maduro weaponized cocaine, collaborated with FARC, ELN, Cubans, Hezbollah, and violent criminal networks. He asserts Venezuelan and Cuban intelligence infiltrated U.S. institutions for 2 decades. I wouldn't necessarily discount that statement, but also let's not act like the CIA has not been doing 1 million times worse things in Venezuela and unto the Cuban people for the past however many decades, 2 decades in the case of Venezuela. But the reason why I say this is bullshit is because, okay, you've got a guy who's in prison. He's probably being tortured. They're probably saying, carrot and stick, maybe we can lessen your prison sentence if you write this letter saying that Maduro is literally the worst thing since World War II. And how do I know this? Because Alex Saab is a friend of mine. I consider him to be a friend. Alex Saab is the man who, I mean, he's the Minister of Finance and Investments for Venezuela. He is a very, very, very close associate ally of President Maduro. And when the sanctions were happening unto Venezuela, when the U.S. was imposing all these illegal sanctions, Alex Saab was the man who established the programs with Turkey, with Iran, with Russia, with China, to circumvent these sanctions and provided food to the Venezuelan people. Now, Alex Saab, when he was in the middle of these negotiations and organizing humanitarian support and also, country-to-country deals for goods that Venezuelans needed at the time these sanctions were being implemented, he was flying to a lot of these countries in his jet. And on one of the times they were flying, I don't remember to what country, but he was flying somewhere. And the U.S. forced the country that he was headed to for refueling before reaching his final destination. He was stopping in a country to refuel. He was gonna, stop for a few hours, whatnot. The U.S. ordered that country to refuse entry to Alex Saab, Maduro's right-hand man. And they said, you can't allow him in. There was no sort of international arrest warrant for him. He wasn't on those international blacklists, whatever they call them, at that point in time. And he was forced to eventually land his plane in Cape Verde. Now, in Cape Verde, the U.S. forced the government to arrest Alex Saab. While he was in Cape Verde, they tortured him. They did horrific things to him. They didn't let his family, his wife, his kids come visit him. And he was held there at least for, I believe, 24 or 48 hours without the U.S. even putting his name on the international arrest warrants list. So you have a guy who's being illegally held, illegally arrested, illegally tortured because he was Venezuelan, he was in the government, and he was working to try and circumvent the sanctions. Then Cape Verde was not extraditing him to the United States. The United States really wanted Cape Verde to extradite him so they could take him to Miami and hold him in prison and give him a very lengthy sentence. Cape Verde wasn't doing it. They were still holding him, but they weren't doing it. And he recounted to me the story when I was in Caracas that what ended up happening was there was elections coming up in Cape Verde, and the incoming government was possibly going to let him go or was going to outright refuse extradition at any point in time. The government that was in charge prior to the elections was more hesitant, we'll say. So what the United States did was they took a bunch of warships and surrounded Cape Verde and said, extradite Alex Saab to the United States or else. So you can guess what happened. They extradited him. They took him to the United States. And when he was in the United States, they held him in Miami. Again, I believe they did not let his wife, they didn't let anyone come and visit him. They didn't let his kids visit him. Barely got to speak to them. They deprived him of darkness. They held him in like rooms with lights. They were torturing him in effect. So this is what they did to him in Miami. And of course, they tried to cover all of this up. Eventually, a deal was struck. He was freed. But I mean, he was held there in Cape Verde and Miami for years. They tortured him. They did horrific things to him. I'm not going to get into all of it. I don't know how much of it he said in the public. But this is what they do to a guy who was just trying to feed his people, trying to organize deals with the bad countries, with Iran, with Russia, with China, with Turkey, even a NATO country, Turkey, to feed his people amid sanctions. And this is what they do to him. So now imagine you have a war that is on the precipice of beginning. 70% of the public doesn't support it. What are you willing to do to this prisoner, this former spy chief, to get him to say what you want him to say? To get him to say that he's working with Hezbollah and Maduro's working with Hezbollah, Maduro's doing all this cocaine, fentanyl, all these things. You can imagine, right? I say this is bullshit. I say you have to be extremely stupid to believe that this letter was written in earnest, with good intent, not under pressure, right? But that apparently Mike Flynn and Gary Lake are doing Trump's bidding right now, and they want you to believe otherwise. Okay, now the last thing I want to say about this story is this right here. Venezuela has a very strong military. They are showing some of their S-300 VM air defense systems supplied by Russia here that they're practicing with, they're training with. But I must remind you all that Trump this week threatened war on Colombia. He's effectively threatening war on Mexico by threatening with these airstrikes on Mexico. At what point do we have to learn from history, recent history, and just wake up to the fact that small country by small country, the U.S. will pick the anti-imperialist world apart. The U.S. will pick the multipolar world apart. Israel will do the same. If it's Israel versus Gaza, Israel versus Syria, Israel versus Lebanon, Israel versus all these small countries, one by one, even big countries, Israel versus Turkey, Israel versus nuclear Pakistan, taking on countries one by one is much easier than having to defend or having to launch an offensive campaign against a cohesive union of countries that are defending their sovereign assets. Okay. And it's why Professor Alexander Dugin, he tweeted this out. It's very interesting what he had to say. What if Venezuela, Colombia, and Mexico form military alliance in order to defend their sovereignties? Something that Islamic countries didn't do during the genocide in Gaza. What if Russia and China supply them with certain support? Now, of course, I'm on YouTube. I'm not advocating anything like that, but let's use our brains for a second. If you have 5 friends and each one of you is getting picked on by a bully. The bully's really big, but you've got 5 small friends. Are you just going to allow that bully to pick out, bully you, each one of you individually? Or what are one of you going to decide, use your brains and say, you know what, from now on, guys, we're all getting picked on by this big, scary bully. We're going to start traveling in a pack of 5. We're going to start working together. We're not going to be apart from one another as we walk to school, as we're in school, as we walk back home from school. We are going to be a unified front of 5 small little guys. And if anyone tries to pick on us, it's not going to be a good day for them if they come just by themselves, even if they are a big guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's look at the Middle East as an example. Colombia's getting threatened. Mexico's getting threatened. Honduras is getting basically cooed. Nicaragua is getting threatened. Cuba's getting threatened. Venezuela's getting threatened. Are you going to allow them to do the same thing? Is that a smart idea? Do what you want, not my country. I don't have a dog in the fight necessarily. I just want people to have their sovereignty respected. That's all I really care about. Beyond that, it's not my country, not my people. But if you seek to maintain sovereignty for the people of your countries, I think we need to start thinking about how we defend ourselves in a different way. And I think it begins with ideas like this. Before you leave, I want to say thank you for the support, because after 2 years of being banned, we are finally back home on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and also join as a member on our channel using the link at the top of the description. I rely on the generous support of viewers like yourself to get the truth out to as many people as possible. You can also support the show on Locals or Give Sin Go. The mainstream media and the powers that be are never going to stop attacking us for bringing the truth to as many people as we do. Thank you so much for your support.